Today we are making a classic Victoria sponge, complete with a rich vanilla bean whipped cream, fresh raspberries and a berry jam. Look at it, a thing of beauty. We're going to start by preheating the oven and lining these springform tins. So I love springform, they're just too easy to use. Pop the lid off with this latch, place a piece of baking paper on top, over, and we're done. Same thing over here. And done. Alright, so we're going to start by adding the flour, caster sugar, cornstarch, bicarbonate soda, salt, and baking powder. Just going to whisk these together to disperse all those ingredients. For me, it's like a quick way of sifting. So just give them a light whisk. Then for our liquid component, we have the plant-based milk, very mild flavored oil like peanut or a cold pressed sunflower. The secret to the golden color, a little bit of previously cooked and cooled sweet potato, vinegar, brown or muscovado sugar, and a tiny bit of vanilla extract. We're going to blend these together. You can use a blender or a NutriBullet. And then we will add this creamy liquid component. And then we'll just mix this gently to combine everything. Too much about over mixing. So in this case, just a quick whisk at the end brings everything together nicely and removes any clumps of dry ingredients. So there we go. So into our prepared tins, we're putting 450 grams or a pound for a 20 centimeter or 8-inch tin. So when we have bicarbonate soda in a batter, it does this great thing of slightly aerating the mix before we've started baking. So it should level itself, but I just like to do this little rotating thing to kind of get a bit of centrifugal force pushing the batter out. So especially where it has kind of domed slightly in the middle from pouring it in the middle, I just give it a light kind of rotation, spread it out, and then it will level itself. So we take our rounds of sponge out of the oven. So I've got one near perfect one, which will be the top layer, and one with a slight crack, which is actually baking on top. The best way to avoid that is to actually put a little tent of foil over the top, and that kind of keeps the steam in and delays the way that the cake bakes. Now, if you want a more level cake with less of a dome, you can use baking strips. Now, this insulates the sides and stops a crust from forming as the cake bakes, so that it kind of delays that edge from cooking, and they work really well. Highly recommend them. Otherwise, a tint of foil just helps create a more smooth dome. I'm going to let these cool on the wire rack. So this has cooled down a little bit. I'm just going to run a knife along the edges. You run the knife pushing against the edge of the rim to get a nice clean cut. And keep it as vertical as you can. And then release the ring. And we have two lovely rounds of sponge. To assemble the Victoria, we have our two beautiful golden rounds of sponge. One of them is really nice, beautifully domed, almost flawless. The other one has a crack. Now, one of these is going to be the base, so I'm choosing this one. I'm going to trim just a tiny bit off the top to make it nice and flat. So the easiest way to do that is to actually set a location using your fingers as a kind of level, and then gently rotate the cake around. As you go around, each time you're pushing the knife slightly deeper. You can also use a sawing motion as you go through. You lift that up and we have a flat top. So I'm going to transfer this base piece to a plate. I have my raspberry jam that I've prepared earlier. Over the top, just in a beautiful layer all the way to the edges. Kind of working your way to the edges. So a tip for spreading jam nicely all the way to the edge is to use a springform tin. Just release it, kind of shimmy it around the cake, and then use that as a guide to spread against. So depending on which side you're spreading, you can use then you can just release it, kind of give it a little rotate to clean the edge, and then just give it a slight swipe. And then we have some lovely raspberries. Basically want to space them a raspberry apart. And if your jam is on the softer side, you can just start on the edge and push it up and then into the jam. There we go. Now comes the fun part. We have some prepared rich vanilla bean cream. It's not very sweet, but it's got a really luscious and stable texture. So I am going to put some into a piping bag with a large plain tube. I'm going to pipe these in between the raspberries. Now I'm kind of piping and then pulling inwards because and then we're going to pipe a nice big spiral and you're welcome to place some more fresh raspberries in the middle. In fact, let's do that. I'm just going to break these up and kind of dot them into the sponge for a little burst of extra raspberry flavor. So I'm just pushing them into the cream and then replacing our lovely top piece of sponge on top. And we have but one final touch, which is to give this gorgeous looking thing a little sprinkling of icing sugar. Don't need to go too heavy, just a nice even layer. Finish, we have one raspberry, little nipple, crown, whatever you call it, but there we go. That's the Victoria sponge.